I recently heard that pandas are no longer facing a threat of extinction, and that made me smile. I'm tired of a lot of underwhelming news around us. And of course, I know that there are a lot of things that aren't working well in our world. And I don't want to pretend like that's not happening, but I also don't want to be consumed by it. I want to talk to you about the importance of how to be centered in yourself when you feel like there's just too much happening in the world, that it's getting too noisy with negativity and things that you have no control over directly. In this episode, I'm discussing what to do when you feel like you're surrounded with negativity, how to escape the doom and gloom, how to work with faith instead of fear, and a simple way I use when I want to stop catastrophizing a situation. So if this sounds good to you, stick around. Welcome back to another episode of the Actionables podcast. I appreciate you tuning back in. In case this is the first time we are meeting, my name is Peyton. I work as an NLP personal growth coach. And on this podcast, I share my insights that can help you work on your life goals in a simpler way without unnecessary stress and struggle. If you want to experience coaching for your goals, there are some pro bono coaching slots. You can book a free coaching slot from the link mentioned in the description box below. Also, if you like what you hear, be sure to hit that follow button wherever you're listening to this. And with that, let's jump into this episode. If you watch the news, you'll agree with me how much of it is consumed with terrible events. And I'm not going to get into all of that. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that when you come across news that's mostly filled with doom and gloom, it obviously doesn't feel good. This is also one of the reasons I don't actively turn on the news channels, and I get most of my news from social media or someone close to me tells me about it. I know this may not sound very intelligent or smart of me to say. In fact, I had someone in my life point out that I was quote unquote missing out if I wasn't actively tuning into the news. I told him that I wasn't interested in consuming news that was unsettling because I was deeply affected by it. The irony is, even though I don't actively watch news channels, I still do consume some kind of news on my social media. And it so happened that this behavior or habit rather started to get a little too intense for me. So, over the last couple of months, I've significantly reduced my scrolling time on social media. And the reason is because everywhere I looked, I felt I was coming across news that was simply sad. And I felt that started to affect me in a way that I wanted to escape it. And when I say escape, I want to be clear. I don't mean to pretend that it isn't happening, but instead, I wanted to get intentional with what I was consuming. Even though my professional training and work has taught me that the quality of your thoughts is affected by the media that you consume, I had fallen a bit off track and my screen time had gone up quite a lot, which is also why I decided to go off social media for a couple of months. This is a classic example that you may know a lot of things intellectually, but sometimes, if you aren't careful, you can go down a rabbit hole of consuming media that can affect your mental health. Now, thankfully, in my case, it didn't cause severe mental stress, but it had just enough impact that I knew that I needed to get back on track and become more mindful with the type of media that I was consuming. I hear a lot of my clients share that they feel mentally tired a lot, even though their work may be under control. And there's enough research that suggests that the doom scrolling may be giving you a hit of dopamine, but that endless, mindless scrolling also can leave you feeling fatigued. And needless to say, when you're mentally exhausted, working on anything creative is not just more difficult, but also doesn't feel interesting anymore. I want to talk to you about what actually happens in your brain when you constantly consume negative news or fall into doom scrolling, and why it drains your energy, affects your mood, and even lowers your motivation to work on your goals. What I'm sharing now is all my years of leaning into neuroscience and NLP, and I'll try to share it in the most simple way possible. So let's start with something called as the negativity bias. Our brains are built to pay more attention to negative information than positive ones. And I'm not making this up. This is called the negativity bias, and it's thousands of years old. Our ancestors needed this to survive because noticing danger is what kept them alive. And this wiring still exists today. But now, instead of watching out for tigers, your brain reacts the same way to alarming headlines, dramatic posts, and bad news online. So, when you scroll and see something upsetting, your brain's alarm center, which is the amygdala, instantly lights up. It's doing exactly what it thinks it should, which is keeping you alert. But when that reaction happens over and over throughout the day, your stress response stays switched on for a much longer time than it should. This stress response triggers a hormone called the cortisol, which is helpful in small bursts because it essentially keeps you up, it sharpens your attention. But if it keeps rising because you're constantly feeding your brain negative content, it starts to wear you down. And what was once a survival mechanism now becomes a source of mental fatigue. Here's when this becomes important for your daily life. The part of your brain that helps you plan, focus, make decisions, stay disciplined, the prefrontal cortex, doesn't work well when stress is high. This part of the brain is responsible for things like staying on track with your goals, resisting distractions, and following through on tasks. When you doom scroll and stress builds up, your prefrontal cortex becomes less effective. You may notice that you can't concentrate, or you may start tasks and find it difficult to continue them, or simple decisions feel mentally exhausting. That's not you being weak or lazy. That's literally your brain under strain. But there's another layer. Stress doesn't just make you tired, it also affects your reward system, which includes areas like the ventral striatum, that is the part of the brain that responds to progress, small wins, and that feeling of, yes, I'm getting somewhere. Normally, when you take a small step towards a goal, maybe writing for 5 minutes or organizing your desk, your brain gives you a tiny dopamine boost that feels rewarding. This is what reinforces habits and builds motivation in the long run. But when cortisol is high and your stress circuits are overloaded, this reward system becomes less responsive. In simple terms, your brain doesn't feel the good job feeling as strongly. Tasks that used to feel achievable suddenly seem heavy. Things you normally enjoy feel flat or uninteresting. You may even start avoiding tasks not because you don't care, but because the reward system isn't giving you the energy required. This combination, weak executive function and muted reward system, is exactly why doom scrolling drains your motivation. You feel mentally tired, emotionally flat, and less driven to work on things that matter to you. Also, cognitive cost. Switching from one piece of negative content to another forces your brain to constantly shift attention. That constant micro switching burns energy. You might not notice it right away, but after 10 or 20 minutes of scrolling, you suddenly feel exhausted or low. That's not random, it's cognitive fatigue building up. The good news is the brain is incredibly adaptable. So you don't have to quit news or social media completely. In fact, small, simple habit tweaks can protect your mental energy, such as limiting when you check your news, maybe once in the morning and once in the evening. You may want to curate your feed so you don't get hit with unexpected high stress content. Or even taking short breaks, like every 3 to 5 minutes of breathing and walking, can lower cortisol. You may want to replace doom scrolling moments with something lower stress, such as watching a calming video. In my case, it's a cat video, or maybe reading something inspiring. These small shifts help the prefrontal cortex come back online, calm the amygdala, and wake up the brain's reward system so motivation becomes more natural again rather than a constant fight. So the next time you catch yourself doom scrolling, remember, it's not just stealing your time, it's affecting the very systems in your brain that keep you focused, motivated, and energized. Guarding your attention isn't just a productivity strategy, it's a way of protecting your brain's ability to show up for the life that you want to build. Now that we understand how our brains may be getting affected by doom scrolling, I want to talk to you about what you can do if you feel the doom and gloom and how to get out of this habit of mindlessly consuming negative content. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not suggesting that you give up social media completely, but I have noticed that limiting it and being intentional with what you're consuming obviously has a positive effect on the cortisol levels, which then affect your motivation to work on your goals. Now, practically, if you look at any habit such as this one of doom scrolling and getting affected by the negativity around, I want to draw your attention that we human beings operate essentially from two main emotions. And you may know what they are. They are called love and fear. Everything that you're doing in life is rooted in these two emotions or both. For example, if you don't like the work that you do, but you still have to do it, it's because it pays the bills. You're operating from both fear as well as love for yourself and for your family. Our behaviors are actions that we keep repeating, and we repeat actions because consciously or unconsciously we are operating from a place of love or fear. Ask yourself, do you love what you're doing, or are you doing it because you fear something bad is going to happen if you don't do it? Similarly, if you find yourself constantly doom scrolling, you may want to turn your attention towards what is it that you're trying to avoid or perhaps feel by consuming media. When you pay attention to your behaviors that have become so ingrained within you, you start increasing your awareness levels. You may realize that maybe you've gotten into the habit of doom scrolling because you're trying to escape doing something else in life, which is probably more important but feels difficult, which may be the reason you're avoiding it. Or perhaps you feel like you've gotten into a funk that you just can't get out of. Whatever the realization you may have, there is a moment when you will know the motivation behind your habits. And when you know why you are doing what you're doing, that's a very powerful moment. Because what happens then is you understand clearly the reasons for your habits and if those habits are serving you. Are they making you feel empowered? Then that's great. On the flip side, if you realize that, damn, my reason for my habits isn't making me feel so great, that is powerful information. And when you are armed with that clear reason or reasons behind why you keep repeating your behaviors, you can choose to stick with them or make the difficult choice to change them. I've learned when your awareness about your habits increases, the outside noise reduces. It becomes much easier to become centered. Because when you know you're operating from your truth, whether it be from a place of love or fear of something, and no one can judge whether your reasons are right or wrong as long as they make sense to you. Personally, for me, the barometer for whether my emotions of love or fear are guiding me well is when I ask myself, how do I feel when I repeat a certain behavior? It's that simple. With doom scrolling and mindlessly consuming media, it started to make me feel a little sad and even sick. And I had my own realization of what I was avoiding. And then I turned that information around and used it to guide my next actions. Once you know how you feel about a particular habit, you can take it a step further and do a simple exercise, which, for the fun of it, I call NWG, which stands for Noticing What's Good. It's important to not just feel good about your habits, but to keep them going. And this exercise of noticing what's good makes you sustain your feeling of being satisfied with your goals and with your habits. And this is how I use this exercise. For example, I have not completely quit social media just yet. I do check in and I feel good about how I'm currently using it and my relationship to how I'm consuming media. I avoid distressing news, I've curated my feed, and in addition, I go and search for what's good in the world. There are a lot of pages that spread positivity and joy, and that helps me with my habit of being more intentional with scrolling. One such positive news was what I opened this podcast with, that pandas are no longer a threat to extinction. So, noticing what's good in the world and also in your own life helps you in becoming centered, grounded, and it helps you feel better, even though there may be a lot of negativity around. So, if you want to be more centered and grounded while working on your goals, you can choose to book a free coaching session with me on the link mentioned in the description box below. With that, it's a wrap on this episode. I'm curious if this resonated with you. Tell me if it did. You can email me at peytonbhutia@peytonbhutia.com. That's the fastest way to get in touch with me. Till next week, I hope you remember that you matter, your goals matter, and it's really up to you to make them happen. Take very good care of yourself, and I'll talk to you soon.